the slightest. And I didn't understand what they meant by participation. I wanted it not to be my subjective view. I wanted there to be something objective about how I was awarding these points. I remember talking to some people about participation. They weren't working in KNU. And they were like, yes, the students who I like the best get 10%. The students who annoy me get 5%. I was deeply disturbed by this. I really wanted to make sure that it was being assessed correctly. So I asked myself, let's move on to the next slide. I asked myself, next slide, yeah. I asked myself what I could do with it. And I came up with a gamified system for it, but this was even before I understood it. Now, most gamified systems work off of PBL, which are points, badges, and leaderboards. Now, the problem that I find when I'm lecturing on the design of gamification is that most lazy designers will just slap these onto a system and send the invoice to the client. They'll just go, okay, I'm done. There isn't a great deal of thought and effort being put into it, which is why I'm talking about my design steps first. So first of all, I identified a problem. I wanted to make sure that my classes were being accurately reflected. And then I asked myself, okay, but how are they being reflected? Let's move on to the next slide. Well, this is the problem with both learning and participation. How do we measure an invisible phenomena? We can only measure what the students do. We can't really measure what is occurring in their head. So the best analogy I've ever heard for how do you assess learning is by asking, how would you judge whether or not it is a windy day if you are stuck inside and all you can do is look out through the window? Of course, you would do things like, well, are the trees moving? Are the trees moving? Are people's umbrellas being pulled out? Is it raining? Is the rain coming down at an angle? All of these issues will give us clues that it is windy. But we can't directly measure the wind from the position that we're in. This is the same thing with learning. We can't directly measure learning from our position because it's happening inside the student's brain. We can't directly measure participation. We can only measure the actions that the students are taking. Let's move on to the next slide. So what are the actions that suggest participation? And I'm going to throw this open to the audience and actually ask people to give it a shot. Anybody want to give some suggestions as things that you could see students doing that hint at participation? The Zoom classroom. Greg?
There we go. I was trying to find frantically looking for my unmute. How do you, what actions suggest participation? I think the responses to questions.
Responses to questions. So responds to a question, that would be one. Anybody want to give another one? Becky?
I think for me, participation even begins with the non-verbal answers that show they're paying attention. And then from there, I can get it going from non-verbal kind of making eye
Mhm.
contact with you to then getting them to draw it out and give you a verbal answer.
Okay, so eye
I kind of
contact.
build participation that way.
hmm So eye contact,
Yep,
you
yep,
can measure their eye contact or their raising of hands.
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. So we've got asking questions, whether or not they are physically making eye contact. Okay. Any other ones?
Could be the questions that they ask you,
hmm
um, like a clarification question.
Yeah, you can subdivide questions into clarification questions, into uh, friendly questions. Okay. Um, how about if they're self-correcting? Becky, you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say, they're a little bit like we are in this group. We're all quite quiet.
hmm
So I kind of take into account if I see people talking to each other and
Okay.
kind of interacting at least somewhat on the topic, I kind of
hmm
consider that a form of participation.
Yep, I would too.
Yeah.
Interaction with a partner.
Interaction
You
with a
can
partner on the topic.
on the topic. Yeah.
Yep.
Another great predictor for participation is being present.
Yeah, that's true.
Hmm.
If the students aren't present, they cannot be participating. So the first predictor for whether or not a student is going to participate in the class is if they are going to be present in the class. Whether or not they're talking, engaging with somebody else in the class, well, that is a form of participation, as long as you're careful and making sure that they are on topic. Whether or not they're asking questions also shows participation. So we need to define, especially when we're looking at continuous assessment, we need to define what are the markers that we're looking for. Let's move on to the next slide. So the actions I wanted to see my students doing were, first of all, I wanted to see if they were in attendance. Second, I wanted to see if they were asking me questions, if they were engaging that way. I wanted to see if they were helping their partner, if they were engaging not just teacher to student, but also student to student, which is in a language-based, conversation-based classroom, this is incredibly important. I wanted to see if they were engaging with the material. I wanted to see if they were using a dictionary. I wanted to see if they were self-correcting. And I wanted to see if they were answering my questions. So if I threw a question out into the audience, I wanted to see if they were responding back to me. So I identified 7 things that I was looking for in my participation classroom to help me to understand participation. Let's move on from there.
These are your blowing trees.
These are my blowing trees. So then I thought a little bit about, okay, so these are my blowing trees. Which one is the most important? Which one is the next most important? And then I have to think about what type of points am I engaging with? Because I'm going to be giving points for these. So there are 5 different types of point systems that we can use. The first one and the most simple one are experience points. And they are really, really simple because they just keep racking up over time. There's nothing else that happens. They just keep climbing. The next one are redeemable points. And redeemable points are points that you earn and then you burn. So you earn those points and then you use those points to get something. Skill points are kind of what, if you're taking a fine grain detail, I could break down how many points the students were getting for answering questions. I could break down how many they were getting for helping their partner. And I could break those into, okay, in this skill set, you're doing this. In this skill set, you're doing this. But I just combine them all to keep them simple and experience points. Reputation points are how good you are. And karma points out there are really interesting because these are points that only exist for me to give them to someone else, for a student to give them to someone else. So I didn't use any of the systems the first time I did this, except the XP. I just kept it really, really simple. I just was like, you are striving to reach these points. You are gaining points every day. Let's move on. So now that we know what the actions are that we're looking for, and we know the type of point system that we're using, which is just simple XP points, we need to know how much the points, the actions are worth. So I decided that the being present, even being present in the back of the classroom, was enough to get you a C in participation. So I decided that that one thing was worth 3 points. And every other action that you took was worth another +1 point. If you got 5 points every class, you'd be getting 100% of your grade, 100% of the participation grade. However, if you got 6 points one day and 4 points the other day, it didn't matter. You would still be getting your 100%. You could still game the system a little bit. This was to encourage students who may have missed a class because they got sick or they couldn't make it for some reason to come back in and try to work hard to catch up. And this on the right-hand side of the screen is literally the paper-based system that I used to record this. It had the class number that I was teaching at the top. It had the student numbers, the student names. I also, because I am terrible with remembering student names, I also had name tags for all the students with their class number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I would go around and I would literally every time I saw the desired action, I would make a notation on this on my sheet. And we'd go from there. So I was doing continuous assessment, but I had broken down the continuous assessment to the elements that I wanted to observe. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, the next thing to think about is, what did those points mean? Well, again, I kept it fairly simple. The points, the reward structure that was out there was all about status. If you were getting high scores continuously, boom, 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 you were going to get a high score at the end of the course. It tied into the grading criterion so that everything was clear and easy to do. However, there are different reward structures that we can use. We can use status. We can use, which is who's higher on the totem pole than who. And if you don't think that your students in Korea know exactly who is at the top of the class and who is at the bottom of the class, you haven't been teaching for very long. We can also use access as a reward system. So if enough of the, for example, the point system could be, if enough of the students score a 4 through the day, then you get access to play the games that you want to play for the last half an hour. It unlocks. Or we could use a power system. If you get a high enough scoring over the 2 weeks, you get to decide what the next module is going to be that we're going to move on to. And the final level is stuff. If everybody gets enough points, we have a pizza party at the end. Of all of them out there, in terms from gamification perspective, status is the easiest one for you to leverage. Access is the second easiest. Power is the slightly more difficult. And stuff is the most expensive because you have to actually buy stuff. And it can have a negative impact on it. So I kept it really simple. I was just literally going for status. But there are different ways that we can do it. Let's move on. So because I was going for status, I just kept it really simple. If you got an average score of 3, you were coming out with a C in participation. If you kept an average score of a 4, you were looking at a B. And an average score of a 5, you were looking at an A. Average of a 5+, you were looking at an A+. And this is really simple because it literally goes 1F, 2D, 3C, 4B, 5A. So really simple, and I really was not doing my best of design here, but it works very, very well, and it works easily to do it. So the only way for you to get a D in participation in the class was for you to miss a pile of classes. Let's move on. So I had my system. I had it conceptualized. I had my pieces of paper ready for the day. I had my little lanyards with the numbers, the name tags to help people. But the thing is, we need to onboard the system. You can't just take a system in and go, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to tell the students about this. They're just going to have it done to them. There is something inherently unethical about any educational process which is not done with the full understanding of the student who is engaging in it. So we have to introduce it. And I introduced this system through an activity. And the activity was a sorting activity where I had a list of behaviors. And I asked the students, is this behavior the behavior of a C+ student or an A+ student? And as a class, I asked them to sort into the correct column. And I put them in teams of 2, teams of 3, or whatever. And I said, okay, everybody, go. And as they were doing this, I was walking around note-taking. And everybody, this activity served 2 to 3 purposes. The first purpose was getting students to think about how their action can impact their grades, which gives them a feeling of agency, which is incredibly important, especially for university and high school learners. That feeling of, I am actually in control, or I have some element of control on what I am doing. The second was, it gave me an opportunity to get them speaking from day one and get them into an activity from as quickly as possible. And third, it served as onboarding. It's served as a method of getting the students to understand the system. All of my students, every time I ran this activity, every single student would agree that asking questions to the teacher was a thing that A+ students would do. Every single one of them. We would have a little bit of debate because I also had doing lots of homework, C+ student, A+ student. And we would have a discussion, and it would help me to bring up my feelings about homework and the difference between smart homework and dumb homework. Okay. But all students agreed asking a teacher a question is a wonderful thing, a great thing to do. And then I would step back and I would go, okay, how many people asked me questions today? And you would see the look on the students' faces go, huh, wait a second. And I would go, I'd look down at my sheet and go, 4 people out of 30 in this class asked me a question today. We all agree that using our dictionary is a good thing to do. How many people use their dictionary today in class? 6 people use their dictionary in class today. And I would hold up the sheet and go, this is who everybody is, and this is what I'm doing. And I am going to be checking this every single day to see how you're doing. And you can come to me and ask me, how did I do today? How can I do better next class? And the stronger that you do in this class, the stronger that you will do in the next class, and it will build up. And from taking this simple activity and getting them into what game designers call the core loop as fast as possible, the students could quickly understand what the expectations of the class were, what my expectations for their behavior were, and a great deal of other elements to it. Let's just move on to the next slide. So the system had some very interesting effects. First of all, I ended up with some of the noisiest classes in the university. My students started talking a hell of a lot more because they realized that, wait a second, I'm going to get rewarded for talking. And I was a nightmare to be the person that you were teaching next to because my classes got up to quite high decibels. Some of my students gamed the system. Some of the students figured it out. And one student in particular ended up scoring 106% on participation. He figured out that, okay, it's not that difficult to do this. It's not that difficult for me to make sure that I am moving this system forward. So I'm going to make sure that I get all of the symbols every single day. And I do remember the student quite well because he would come up and he would check his scoring for the day and complain to me if I had missed seeing him do something. So there were times where he came up to me and complained, teacher, I asked you a question today. I asked you how are you today? And I'm like, that's not a question, man. Not at this stage. Come on, you can do better than that. So, and he literally started to really engage with it. My student approval rating went up quite dramatically as well because the students could understand what I was doing. It was no longer the students feeling like I was having a class favorite or you're my favorite or you're not my favorite. It was literally, this is what I am observing, and you have the power to change what I am observing. You have the power to change what I'm doing, and you have the power to get these points. My workload inside the class decreased. There were fewer discipline issues because the students were understanding that, hey, I need to do this in class, I need to do this in class, I need to do this in class. I do these things, everything's golden. And if somebody was misbehaving in class, I could just look down at them and go, come on, man, how are you doing today? What's going on? And there were days where students were feeling sick and and I could go to them and go, hey, are you okay today? And they're like, yeah, I drank too much soju last night. I just got a headache from hell. I'm just not with it today, teacher's sick. And I'm like, okay, don't worry. Make up the points next class. They're like, thanks, teacher. Boom. Head down on the desk. So instead of creating a situation where the students suddenly felt like they were being punished and they had control. At the end of the class, at the end of the course as well, there was something that is intrinsic about students in my experience who come into your office and go, teacher, grade up. And I would sit there and I'd go, and I would pull out my the spreadsheet, which had everything, and I'd go, well, you really didn't try very hard during class. You've just, and I could say literally on this date you were like this, on this date you were like this, on this date you were like this, on this date you were like this. And I was like, you didn't really try very hard in class. Why should I do this for you? And the amount of students who would just go, okay, and wander off. Because they understood that it was a system. And they also understood that they really couldn't fight against it because I had all the data to back me up. Let's move on to the next slide. So as you can see, I started off with just pieces of paper. Pieces of paper and name tags. And a rather mediocre understanding of systems and how I wanted the system to work. Then it evolved. I went and I found Classroom Dojo. And Classroom Dojo has the advantage of the students can actually pick their little monsters and they can change the artwork and everything like that. And if you look up in here on the give feedback screen, I had literally, yep, just there. I had literally all of the things that I was looking for in my paper version were right there. And I had my smartphone. And the smartphone was also tied to the projector screen at the top of the classroom. So if I gave somebody a bonus point for doing something, it would display on the screen for a second. This person, here's your bonus point, and give a little ding noise. And all it was a faster feedback system where the feedback system could be more instantaneous and that the students didn't have to come to me at the end of every class. They were getting the information as they were going on and going through the system rather than having to wait and go, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that? So I really, really recommend paper first. Always go with the paper first and then start looking for the technological solutions. But the technological solutions are out there. You just have to understand what it is that you're building before you go to the digital version. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so lessons learned. Start small. If you're getting into or wanting to get into gamification for your classroom or for educational purposes, start small. You don't have to build a full system from the very beginning. In fact, when I'm teaching gamification principles and courses on gamification for people like small to medium enterprises, they always come in with this great, wonderful idea of this thing that is going to revolutionize the world. And I have to spend the first 3 days explaining to them why you need to pare it down and down and down and start at a core. Start at a really small idea and then build it up rather than starting at a really huge idea and paring it down. Please, if you get one thing out of this presentation today, realize you don't need tech skills to start leveraging gamification. What you need is a pen and a piece of paper. It helps to also have a decent decent spreadsheet, but the most important thing is the pen, the piece of paper, and the thought that you put into the system. You've got to allow the system to evolve. I did not see very many students self-correcting. It was a thing that was incredibly rare for me to see. So much so that I eventually stopped looking for it. It was just not something that I was looking to engage with. So that point part just went away. Make sure that you're onboarding. If you onboard correctly, the students will enjoy the system and enjoy what you're doing. If you don't onboard them correctly, if they don't understand what you're doing, the students can get very, well, they can start to feel like that's something that's being done to them rather than something that they are directly engaging with. When I brought this out, I have presented on continuous assessment, and I've used this as a model of continuous assessment. And one of the first things that teachers bring out to me is, oh, well, maybe I can add in a negative modifier, a minus number. If I see you looking at your phone too much, you get -1. I'm not a fan of doing that because I feel that we can get better behavior out of students by encouraging them to take positive actions rather than punishing them for taking negative actions. Punishment mechanics are among the most difficult to design in a gamified system. So especially if this is your first time or first foray into doing this, I would recommend steering a little bit clear of them. Let's move on to the next slide. So now it's your turn. And we're going to take a little bit of time because we have a little bit of time to talk about these ideas. And what I want you to do is, on a piece of paper, think to yourself of a classroom or activity or a problem that you're having, and ask yourself, what action do you want to see a student doing? Or what do you want them to do that will nudge them towards better behavior? The ones that I have put up there are from app design rather than necessarily classroom design, but you can use those. The one thing is they have to be discrete actions. So try to come up with 5 actions that you would like to see your students doing. Okay, if we've got our actions that we'd like to see, let's move on to the next slide, because that's step 1. Now, I want you to rank your actions in order of importance. The more important it is, the more points you're going to give it. Okay, that should be a little bit faster than trying to select the action. So we'll move on to step 3. What point system are you going to use? Are you going to keep it simple? Are you going to use simple experience points? Are you going to use redeemable points, points that they can spend on something? Or are you going to go really crazy and decide that some of these points are going to be awarded by the students to other students?
Could you repeat the second one, please?
Redeemable points. Sorry, the 5 types of points out there are XP, which just keep building up. The entire purpose is just that they keep ticking up, 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 up. Redeemable points are a currency. They are a thing that can be used to buy another thing. Skill points are a subsection of experience points that are awarded for specific skills. Then you have reputation points, where you can have the students decide who is the best. And finally, you have karma points, which are, you have a certain amount of them and you give them away based on what you think. The best way to think about karma points are likes on Facebook. The simplest system out there is just the experience points. Lisa, you had a question?
No, I was just unmuting to say thanks, but then you're continuing your explanation. I didn't want to jump in. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sorry,
If anybody wants to review some earlier slides, please take the PowerPoint from the chat and you can look back on those ones. Greg?
Yeah, it was you had those letters XP, RP, and the third one was
XP, RP, SP, REP, and finally KP.
okay, right. Okay.
Karma point systems are interesting. Daniela?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you mix these point systems or do you choose one of them?
If this is the very first time that you're doing it, I would choose just one. But in a more advanced system, first time you're doing it, stick with XP.
Okay.
However, as the system starts to evolve, you can start to add in different point systems. With very young learners, maybe you don't want an XP system at all. Maybe you want a redeemable point system where X amount of points equals a piece of candy. And you get, you're racking up the points until you can buy your candy. Okay. So that's step 3. Think about the point system that you're going to use. Step 4, Greg. If we move on. So
Not showing.
it is,
Sorry.
I'm just having a little bit of difficulty with my, so how are you going to reward the actions? So I kept it very simple when I was doing this by just tying them to the grade score. However, are you going to try to do a slightly different one? Are you going to look at the SAPs, the status, access, power, and stuff? I always love the acronym for that one, which is SAPs. Are you going to just keep it tied to a grade and let people deal with it as a status thing? Are you going to tie it to, hey, you've done enough, you've gathered enough points to be able to open up access to this thing or this thing? Are you going to give the students some level of power? Or are you going to give them some physical reward? Oh, sorry, how are you going to record the actions? I'm terribly sorry. It's actually a little bit earlier in the morning on Saturday for me than you guys, because I'm coming in from Estonia. You have to think about how you're going to code out the system. So I coded the system as a little circle for the person was present, another circle for they were engaging well with the material, HP for helping their partner, D for dictionary, etc. Q and A. So thinking about how you're going to record it so that you can translate from quick observable to a numeric value. Okay, let's move on. How are you going to explain it to the students? Again, what you're looking for is you're looking to get them into the system as fast as possible. You want the system to be simple enough that the students can do it from day one. If you have to spend 3 classes explaining the grading system is too complex. Better than explaining the grading system is a situation where you don't explain the grading system, you just drop them into it and they can figure it out as it goes. And they understand it by what it is that they're doing. They learn by engaging. Kolb's experiential learning cycle jumps to mind there. Okay, so that's step 5. And if you have done all those 5 steps, you should be able to launch a paper prototype gamified system. Let's move on to the next slide. So you should have an idea of a paper prototype system from right there. And you should be able to explain it in such a way that I could give you some feedback on it if you want. There are future questions and future things to expand on the system. First question is, are the points always going to be the same? Are they always going to be static? So is this thing always going to be worth this amount of points? Or is there going to be a sliding scale? So as you start, this thing is worth 4 points, but the next time I see it in a class, it's only worth 3 points. The next time I see it in a class, it's only worth 2 points. The next time I see it in class, it's only worth 1 point. So the first time you do it in the day, it's really, really valuable. But I'm trying to encourage you to do a multiple of techniques. Therefore, the value decreases for that one element. Are you going to change the values as the students continue to demonstrate mastery? If we think of the 5 steps towards mastery, from true beginner or novice through to problem solver, through to mastery. I need to actually look up the terminology. It's defeating me at the moment. Again, my apologies, early morning. The things that you ask a very beginning level student should not be the things that you're asking a student who is proving that they are at the highest level. The markers that you're looking for at this level are not the same as the markers that you're looking for at this level. So one area that you can start to move things along is by adding level markers in. So you start and you say, everybody is at level 1, but when you move to level 2, I am expecting these behaviors for you to be able to progress to level 3, to level 2. And these behaviors are what I look for you to move from level 2 to level 3, and so on. Displaying feedback is incredibly important. Students like to be able to see the feedback and understand where the feedback is and how the feedback is going. Badges, leaderboards, all of these can be done in fabulous ways. The digital options available to them offer some beautiful optionality on leaderboards, for example, where you can avoid the demotivating effect of leaderboards. But you have to, those are a lecture for another day. I could spend the next 3 to 4 hours discussing the various ways that you can deploy badges, the various ways you can deploy leaderboards, and the pluses and minuses of using those systems. And finally, how do you map out your core loop? And if we go to the next slide, I'll explain what I mean by a core loop. Whoops. There we go. The most simple core loop in a game is this. The player does an action. The player is given a reward. The reward motivates the player to do the action again. That is the most simple and fundamental core loop. Player does something, player sees what happens, player is interested, player goes and does the action again or does another action to see what happens. If you can map out, so if we go back to our continuous assessment model, the player asks me a question. The teacher notes down on the piece of paper that the student asked a question. The student goes, "Hey, great, this is helping me get better." The student is encouraged to ask a question again in the next class. And that is the fundamental of continuous assessment. Now, I will admit, when I designed this the first time, I had no idea that it was gamified. I was attempting to design a continuous assessment system, and I wanted it to have a point system that made sense, and I wanted it to have this, this, and this. And it was only after I started reading about gamification that I suddenly realized. Actually, it was after I started teaching about gamification that I realized that, wait a second, this was a very interesting application of gamification. Okay. We have a little bit of time. I believe we have quite a bit of time. We've just gone to the hour mark, or just a little over the hour mark. So normally at this point, I throw it open to the floor and get people to ask me questions or give me some feedback. So the last slide, questions.
There were some in the chat. I just want to look at those first. Miari was asked about, quite a while ago, about how much they volunteered to do the activity. How do they work as a leader?
Yeah, I think this was trying to look at what they saw as participation. And unfortunately, Muri had to step out. So does anybody have any questions or anything that they'd like to talk about? Or would you like to explain a little bit about the idea that you came up with? If I was doing this presentation in person, I would have assigned everybody that activity that I described, the sorting a student from A+ to C+. And I would have also had you wearing the little name tag badges, and I would have done that activity with you for 10 minutes at the start, and then showed you how I designed the system. But unfortunately, the problems of a digital environment.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
I'm curious if you've ever used the karma point system. My nervousness for my students would be that instead of their peer, their
Mhm.
classmate, their friend doing the activities, the classmates or the friend who is better or more willing to do it will do it and then give their points to their friend. I'm just curious if you've ever used the karma point system and if you've ever run into that challenge.
Karma point systems are a little bit, hey, Greg, you spelled my name wrong in my email address. AR.
Sorry. I'll fix it.
Yeah. Karma point systems are a little bit more problematic. The thing that I would recommend if you're going to try a karma point system is to limit the amount of points that are available, or tie it with a redeemable system. So you get X amount of points, and suddenly you are qualified to have a karma point to give away to someone. And why you choose to give away that karma point is completely up to you. So you can give it away to your friend, or you can give it away to somebody who is just struggling and say, hey, look, man, you're struggling here, have a point or two. And I'm helping you out. It could be problematic if you allowed the karma point system to overtake the experience point system. And this is where you have to start thinking about system balancing and how the systems fit together. I hope that answers your question, Lisa.
It definitely does. Thank you so much.
Okay, let me just go last time in for my little bit of my shill, unless, sorry, Daniela, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, if you still have time, I would like to ask a last question.
Sure.
As I know, the Korean students are very competitive, especially if there's a, how do you call this, competitive rewarding grading system where they have to be better than the others to get an A+ and not the absolute
Yeah,
evaluation
I'm
system.
not a fan of that system, but go on. Yeah.
Yes, fine. Fortunately, now we can choose which one we use during the Corona crisis, but otherwise it's always the relative, I think it's called relative evaluation system.
Yeah.
So I wonder, you must be quite busy in a classroom, walking around, taking notes and so on. And there will be probably students who say, hey, teacher, I did, let's say, use a dictionary, but how come I didn't get a point for that? So maybe at that
I
time,
did.
you're looking at somebody else, you know.
I did have students say that to me, and
Right,
to which my response was, okay, what word did you look up today?
Oh, okay. And how about other things like, I mean, some actions that you basically missed?
Yeah.
And the students did it, but you have not seen it, or you have, you didn't take note on that.
Yes, it can be problematic, and you have to train yourself to be in constant motion as a teacher.
Okay. And
but
good at recognizing the students immediately.
And good at recognizing the student behavior that you're looking for.
Right.
But it does
Right.
teach you. You'd be surprised how good you can get at it. I remember at one stage I was able to be engaging with one student while also giving a point to the student to my right and a student who was two things over, because I was also listening. I was engaging with the one student, but I was also hearing out of the other side, and you develop a classroom awareness of it. But it's a slow process that you build up to. If the student if a student comes to you and goes, hey, look, you've been missing me all the time, what you do is you just make sure the next class that you spend a good quality of time with that student. You make sure that you are in that area with that student to make sure that you're not being bad and deliberately missing someone.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I guess you must be very good at multitasking.
No, I'm just really, it's a trained response.
Right.
You learn how to do it.
Okay.
The other thing is that this will work really well in a classroom where it is task-based or project-based, or where the students are actively engaging. If you are trying to do it in a classroom where you are being the chalk and talk model, where you are in front of the class and you are presenting the information to the students, you're not going to have the time to do it. So it really does work well in a task-based environment rather than anything else.
Right. Thank you very much for your presentation and answer.
You're very welcome. Okay, right. Let
Can
me.
sorry, Peter, can I just add, you mentioned about Classroom Dojo, and I do recall using it a few years ago. I stopped, I think, because, as you said, I didn't kind of get the flow. But what I found is I just clicked, and then there was a little music, and the students heard the music, so they know there was a point being given to somebody. But I just kind of was really generous with the points, and so then nobody really came to me and said I didn't get a point, because I was just so generous with them to start with. And I think it kind of fits in with what you said as it being a positive reinforcement.
There is a problem with point inflation, and you have to be careful with that one. The issue that I have with Classroom Dojo is it doesn't necessarily show you how many points you've awarded that day. So you can end up doubling up on the rewards, which I found a little bit problematic when I was using it. But again, start with the paper version and then go and look for the digital versions, because the paper version, you've got full control over it. The digital version is designed by somebody else. But if you start with the paper version, you can always go and find a digital product that matches fairly closely, or you can get in touch with some crazy people and get your product built for you. Which is always
would you be one of those crazy people?
I would be one of those crazy people, or at least I could point you in the direction of some of those crazy people.
Very good.
Okay, last opportunity for me to both shill myself. As I said, I'm working, founding a company at the moment to look at excuse me, I'm founding a company at the moment to design and build language teaching games, specifically tied to classroom activities, so that your classroom activity is being mirrored in the game as a nice little mobile phone application, so that you can encourage students to engage with the system still further. I'm also available to consult on gamification design for both education and for anything else. And as ever, I'm looking for work, so bear me in mind if you come across any projects that you would like to engage with. Okay, thank you very much for coming to the presentation, and I hope you had a good time.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Round of applause, sort of thing.
Round of applause, yes. Thank you very much. And, we survived the technology.
Yeah, and you can reach out to me at my email address, or you can take a look at peadarcallaghan.com, which has a lot of ESL activities.
Excellent. Okay, well, if there are any other questions, you can still continue in Discord, and I think I can track you down, Peter, in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in Discord and everything like that.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Good.
Right.
Thank you so much. Here endeth the
Presentation.
Presentation. And the, okay, there we go.